And now, honest to God, I have a slingshot and I try to scare them away.
No.
I know, I really do. I would never hurt them, but I definitely have to establish respect.
Just put your netting over the top of the koi pond and you'll be fine.
Look, Kelly, he comes and he gets alongside the big pond, and for a while he taunted me until I proved I could deliver a slingshot blast.
Uh-oh, okay.
Then it was the tops of the trees, and I showed him I could hit him there too. And so now it's, honest to God, herons have the best eyesight in the world. They can see you in the house coming to get them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
They're
it's
very smart.
bizarre. Okay, Tom's going to go live. Tom?
Yep. One moment.
You're going live, aren't you?
In just one moment.
Okay, good. I think the bandwidth is better this way.
Yeah, we're ready to roll. That's perfect. Welcome to the 9th installment of The Smartest People in the Room. If you've been following this series, you know that I have been leaning into the notion of the room by broadcasting my portion from various live music venues around Nashville. Today, I'm excited to be at Camp PGP, which is what you get when you combine one of the world's largest lighting and staging companies with a major television production company. Currently, I'm sitting on the main stage, which is a turnkey sound stage with a $2 million lighting rig, a 35-foot HD video wall, pre-rigged sound, pre-rigged special effects. They have several other stages with different capabilities as well. The stage's first client is the Marcus King Band, who's doing 4 live streams every Monday for the next month. If you haven't seen the first show, it looks and sounds amazing. There are several major artists shooting in July, and they've just confirmed a major television network broadcast. The room is mind-blowing, and anyone needing world-class production capability for streaming during COVID must check out this place. Their website is camppgp.com. Again, camppgp.com. Before we get started, let me take care of a little bit of business. I want to thank all of our sponsors, for without their support, we couldn't do what we do. I want to thank First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, which is the search firm that I work for. Many of you out there may know this, but some may not. I am a headhunter in the music industry. Fairlane Hotel, Coral Power Yoga, Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, Four Roses Bourbon, Moo TV, Jive Printworks, Project Music, and also Organics. Today's guests on the smartest people in the room.
Tom,
yes, Jim?
Hold on. Those sponsors, they're extraordinary, I have to say. I mean, I'm freelancing this, but I mean, those also organics have got to be tried. That is an absolute class act.
Mm-hmm.
And those Four Roses people are really gentlemen and scholars. Wonderful.
I'm a big fan of all of those. The CBD product from Also Organics is truly the highest end brand that I know of.
And that First Horizon Bank, if you put money in there, you get more back out. It's true.
On with our program.
Lots of mistakes, I think.
You see why he's the smartest guy in the room? Whoa, there go my notes. Anyway, getting down to business. Today's guests on the smartest people in the room are well known in many circles. First, we welcome back my co-conspirator, Jim Griffin, back in the interviewer seat. Jim is most well known as the curator of the music industry FUD list, which if you are not already a loyal reader of, you need to be. Hit me up and I'll be glad to get you plugged in. Jim
Big week this week.
What's that?
Big week this week. Lots going on.
Well, we'll talk about that in a moment.
I don't think we will talk about it. We're going to talk about Kelli. But I have to say, it's a big week. You missed a lot if you weren't on the list.
That's for sure.
Jim has many other claims to industry fame, but my favorite is being the first CTO of Geffen Records. In this role, he dreamed up and executed the very first digital download of a music track. And that is the perfect segue to introducing our other guest, Kelli Richards. Kelli is a seasoned veteran super connector and business strategist, primarily bridging Silicon Valley innovators and Hollywood storytellers and creating mutually beneficial business opportunities and partnerships between them daily. She helped launch and run Apple's earliest endeavors in music and entertainment during her lengthy tenure there. As a super connector, She has unprecedented access to influencers, celebrities, musicians, and tech innovators, and helps companies to reach these individuals and create win-win business opportunities for all. As a trusted advisor, she transforms the quality of people's lives. She works with high achievers who are at a crossroads and are asking themselves, what's next? Together, they create a life that from here forward is fulfilling form for them and is in alignment with what matters most to them. They strategize on possibilities, leveraging out-of-the-box thinking, a skill she mastered after having been personally mentored by Steve Jobs himself for decades. And then she provides access to virtually anyone her clients need to connect with in order to achieve their goals. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kelli and Jim into the smartest people in the room.
Great to be here with you both.
Very good to see you. It's nice to be outside for a change and doing this outside. Kelli, someone we're going to hear more from in the future and see more of. Kelli has been in the music industry, especially digital music, since it was born. I mean, I think you were there before I was.
I was there right when you were.
Well, probably before me, you know, and
Yeah.
also I got to say, I'm using my MacBook Air today in your honor.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not typically a user of Apple computers, although we own quite a few of them, but I do have a laptop, and so I've got it out for you today.
Glad to hear it.
And that's why I'm going to bring up Apple first, because when I think of you, I think of Apple, because that was my introduction to you, and also a lot of my introduction to Apple computers. So why don't you tell us about your time with Apple and why we closely connect you with Apple when we think of digital music?
Well, Cupertino, where Apple is headquartered in California, is my hometown. And I was fortunate to have a alliance with Steve Jobs, who became my personal mentor from when I was 16 years old in high school. And that informed a lot of my career and my life at Apple and beyond. But I was working at EMI out of college as a young A&R exec. I intended to be a record producer, but being a woman at that time, it was a lockout. So I wound up going into A&R instead. When friends at Apple contacted me 2 years in at EMI and said, we need somebody to launch the music focus for Apple. We thought of you. Would you be interested in coming back home? And I couldn't get back fast enough. That was a dream situation. I was there for around about 12 years, launching and running the music and entertainment focus for Apple in those early days. In those
now, that's
days,
easy. That's easy to go backwards and say that was a dream, but was it really a dream then?
Well, yes, it was. And partly because, you know, Steve always paid me this compliment of saying I could see around corners. And I absolutely had a vision for music being a massive piece of Apple's future, years before the birth of iTunes. 15
well
years
done.
before.
Did I interrupt you?
Yeah, I was going to say 15 years prior to iTunes is when we birthed the music focus.
I just want to say, well done. I mean, wow. Yeah. You know, in retrospect, you could see that it would be a dream, but at the time, it might have seemed a distraction, perhaps.
No, I was fiercely focused on it. And in those days, we were focused on making sure all the creators used Macintoshes and liberated themselves from expensive recording studios. So all the musicians, all the filmmakers, everybody using a Macintosh, then we would tell the stories about what they were doing with them.
Well, wow, you know, a lot of your friends have already shown up here. Brian Zisk is.
Hey, Brian, there he is.
Is here to say hi. And I love Michelle Schacht. I mean, I love arguing with her. And anybody who knows me knows that if I really like you, I like to argue with you. So.
Hi, Michelle.
It is good to see her here. And, and lots more people here, too. So I don't mean to interrupt you, but I guess I do.
It's a dialogue, Jim. It's a conversation.
It's to help you along and really to point out just how prescient it was back then, because I was in the music business back then. And I'll tell you, people thought it was digital was something like CB radio, that it would have about as much impact on their careers as would have.
You know, we were both working with forward-thinking artists who were also tech savvy. I mean, I was privileged to work with, you know, soothsayers like Thomas Dolby and Todd Rundgren and David Bowie and Peter Gabriel and all these guys, and Prince, Herbie Hancock. They all embraced what was coming with tech and music. And those were the guys who got it. And those were the people we formed close relationships with. Ultimately, that segued into me building a company with Todd, the earliest incarnation of artists going direct to fan.
By the way, I just saw Sumiko Sprinkle, and I know that that is a female name and an Asian one. Pete Jenner's wife was named Sumi, his late wife. And having a name like Sumi is really useful in the music business.
No kidding.
It sends a message. Mark Cates showed up too, and Cates is just a gas Howie singer.
Hi, Howie.
But keep going. I just did. I love seeing all these people show up.
Yeah, me too.
Kind of introducing them to where I live. This is. I'm outside right now.
Yeah, so beautiful.
Anyway, keep going and telling us about the early days of digital music at EMI. I mean, of course, Ted Cohen was there around that time. Liz Heller as well.
Yes, she was. Yeah.
I think. I don't know if you worked with her or not.
Yes, I did. Yes.
So you had quite a team there at EMI at that time. No wonder you wanted to get into digital.
Well, no, I would say that they really weren't doing that much in the mid 80s in digital. And since I could see that's where it was headed, especially having had a vision for being an arbiter of music tech from the age of 8 years old, when Apple handed me the gauntlet, I ran with it because somebody had to bridge those worlds. And it had to be somebody with
stories. I mean, any crazy stories of people not understanding where you were headed with this thing? Or
my boss at EMI at the time, Jim, was none other than Neil Portnow, who ultimately wound up helming the Grammys.
Wow.
Neil was so proud. All those years later, every time I'd see him, he'd say, "You were so prescient to go to Apple when you did." You know, he could see he was running the department, that they weren't going to embrace technology in the way I hoped it would happen.
Wow. And I know back then that EMI was ahead of the curve a little bit. I mean, there was there were some sites out there that you guys were working with that were very different, that were presenting music in new ways.
Yeah, but really it didn't take off until after I got out of the label.
That's unfortunate. When you left the label, what caused you to leave? Was it?
What caused me to leave the label, Jim?
Yeah.
Apple knocking on my door saying, "We want you to start the music focus."
So you knew when you walked out the door, I'm walking in the door.
That's
at
right.
Apple.
That's exactly right.
And who talked you into coming there?
I had a bunch of colleagues, having grown up in Cupertino, who were at Apple, who knew the passion for music tech.
Hometown.
Yeah.
You want to lay out there people who were very welcome faces when you walked in the door at Apple?
There's nobody that was there that you would know then, I don't think. This was well before Dave Pacman showed up, and that they were wave 2. I was wave 1, they were wave 2. I mean, I worked with them when they showed up, but they didn't show up for what, 5-6 years after I'd started that.
I mean, it's funny because we released the first full-length song in June of '94.
Right.
It was an Aerosmith track, and people didn't have speakers on their computers for the most part. I mean, most people didn't.
And a lot of people still didn't have CD players.
Yeah, but advanced thinking people like Mark Cates, they demanded this sort of thing.
Yes.
And of course,
and don't forget the guys at DigiDesign who were doing, Pro Tools.
Yeah,
production side. Yeah. So with Pro Tools and the Macintosh, you could liberate musicians to have home studios.
Now, you're also pretty well connected with Todd Rundgren, so I don't want to miss that as we go through all of this. I mentioned EMI, I mentioned Apple, but I want to get on to Todd Rundgren too, because I want you to talk about him as an artist.
Todd was always somebody that I admired as a record producer first, because remember, I had wanted to be a record producer.
Sure.
And then the fact that he was so tech savvy created a natural relationship for us, especially when I was running music at Apple, and he was one of the guys I wanted to include in the success stories. So we forged a relationship, and I decided this is someone who thinks a lot like I do. He could see the future. He's very futuristic, very visionary. And so we birthed this thing called Patronet in the mid-90s, which was basically the first structure for established artists to enable their fans to go direct and underwrite them. And that was the same time with Bowie doing BowieNet. It was the same time with Prince doing the MPG Music Club. And in fact, it was the same time Geiger was birthing Artist Direct. We had meetings with him about the same time he was leaving American Recordings. So all of that was going on.
I
in the
can't let you
90s.
pass mentioning Prince without going into your relationship with him. Now, I don't mean personally like having a relationship with him. I meant
No, it wasn't that
the
way.
business
It wasn't. Prince, and I, again, from the Apple catalyst that first got us connected. But in the late 90s, after I left Apple, Prince effectively became an early client of mine as a trusted advisor, me being the advisor. He would call and say, you know, I'm having trouble figuring out this new technology. What do you think about it? Can you connect me with someone? Or he would forward me a plan that someone had gotten to him and asked me to vet it, see if I think it made sense for him to get involved with or to try out. So he would look to me as sort of his tech consigliere, if you like.
You know, it's funny here, and somebody just mentioned here is Brian Zisk, I think it is, who said, look, the labels didn't really think that Apple was that big a deal, that it was more like dipping a toe in the water so they could experiment with Apple. Was that your experience?
In the early days, the labels were fine working with us because we were enabling their artists to create music in new ways. They were even fine. They were more fine post Napster when Steve came back and had a very minimal market share at the time. So the labels thought, well, you know, less than 10% market share. How much? Let's give it a try. And Steve, of course, talked them into it.
So that helped. They didn't have enormous market share.
No.
And then, secondly, their computers were being used in the studio.
That's right.
To a great
by artists, on demand by artists. And
so when they came with iTunes, nobody really thought, oh, this is going to upend the business.
Yeah, they didn't. And in fact, they were looking
the Windows version came out.
Steve sold it to them as a solution for piracy. Because, of course, in the heels of Napster, the labels were up in arms.
Yeah, what was the impact? I mean, I've always felt that debundling the single was a huge impact on the business that was somehow unanticipated.
Unanticipated by the labels, yes. But Steve,
right, and yet it was clearly something that Apple had in mind, was
absolutely,
giving the customer a better deal.
Yeah, Steve wanted, as a music fan himself, you know, wanted to be sure that fans could pick and choose the songs they wanted, not be forced to buy a CD with 12 songs, only 2 of which they wanted.
I mean, look, that was the 1,000-pound shit hammer that hit Nashville.
That's right.
Songwriters all of a sudden found out that you didn't have to buy the 13 songs you didn't want to get the one you did.
Yeah, and that in itself upended the whole industry for that reason.
Yeah, that was a dramatic change.
Now, the night before iTunes launched, I was kind of an arm's length advisor at that point. I told the guys, I said, you know, you're making a terrible mistake. This should be a streaming platform, not downloads, because of course, Real had launched with Rhapsody, and I could see that's what made sense as to what people were going to want. But they were adamant that they do downloads, and that's the way it went for those first years.
It's funny you tell that the particular stories that you do, and I'd love to hear more of them if you have a few more.
Well, you know, it's funny.
Surely people were on you about how are we going to pay for this digital music. So you and Todd Rundgren come up with Patronet.
Yeah. And the funny thing is about Patronet, Todd built that all himself. Had he not been a successful musician and producer, he would have been a computer programmer. He is just that brilliant. And in his office, he had C++ manuals lining the bookshelves. So he built that from scratch and basically created his own system, his own walled garden, if you like. And that was a problem because it couldn't scale. And a lot of people couldn't just take it off the shelf and plug in, you know, anything on the back end. There were no API integration opportunities. So there's that. But the other thing is Todd kept it pretty close. I kept wanting to get it out to a larger group of artists, but Todd kept wanting to tinker. He would never lock and load. So it was the first model for artists going direct to fan, but ultimately, catch this, Patreon came along and basically ran with the concept that Patronet was intending to do, but Patreon commercialized it years later.
Yeah, and I'd like you to go over that one part there that I think some people miss, which was this notion that the fans would invest in the artist if the labels didn't, and that Patronet would enable this.
That was the goal, was that big artists could be liberated from having to do draconian label deals because they had a large enough fan following that they would just collect the money up front as a subscription fee every month. And in return, fans would get first access to tickets. They'd get to hear songs as they were being created by the artist and even, God forbid, offer feedback, and then get the actual physical CD mailed to them direct from the artist before anybody else had access to it as part of having underwritten the project, if you like.
Now, Glenn Booth asked an interesting question. He wants to know, why didn't Rhapsody beat out Spotify in the US market? Because it had a head start.
It's a very good question.
I
very
have
good
thoughts
question.
on that, but this is for you. I want to hear your thoughts on that.
You know, I wish I had the answer to that question. I asked myself that many times. You know, there was that whole time where we went into, what was it, MusicNet and the press play stuff. That kind of was a distraction for a while, where the labels would try to back horses and figure out who was on first. In those early 2000s, before iTunes launched, there was a lot of chaos in the space. I don't know why Rhapsody didn't take off that way. They certainly were poised to, and they should have.
Well, you know, they were known for DRM at a time
And
when
that was
DRM
part of the problem. That was a big problem. Remember, DRM was a big bugaboo in the early 2000s as well. And it wasn't until Sony Rootkit that it all got exposed and fans were up in arms, and that was the end of that.
Yeah, it was certainly an issue, DRM.
Yeah.
And my own sense of it was the DRM wouldn't matter when the music arrived at the moment you needed it and disappeared when you didn't.
That's right.
When we moved on to music as a service as opposed to a product, whether downloaded or picked up off the back of a truck.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Now, okay, so you're known for seeing around corners. What do you see around the corner now?
Well, I think Apple's going to do right by what Google Glass tried to do for starters in VR and AR. And I think that's going to be a very big play for Apple and for users.
Okay,
You'll find I mean, I don't have no inside knowledge of this. This is all prognostication on my part, but I can read the tea leaves with just Next VR and other players.
We're talking about glasses, right?
We're not talking about glasses that are stylish. Yeah. Apple had product placement in Mission Impossible, all the Mission Impossible films with Tom Cruise. And in one of the early ones, Tom Cruise is wearing like a Google Glasses thing going up a mountain and, you know, can see everything that's going on in VR. That's the kind of thing Apple will build, and it'll be beautiful, and the form factor will be great, unlike the early clunky headsets we've had to deal with and the original Google Glasses.
So are you speaking broadly virtual reality, or are we focusing on augmented reality?
AR is a big part of it too. Both and, not either or.
At what price point does this equipment become ubiquitous and available? And
well, you know, again, Apple always prices things at a premium. I'm guessing $299, something like that.
$300.
Yeah.
Pair of glasses. Will it augment at that point, or will it bring us virtual reality?
I think VR will be first, but I could be wrong about that because Apple's been focused on AR for several years now, and they only just acquired Next VR. So again, I don't have the playbook, and if I knew it, I couldn't say it. I'm just speculating.
Hard to get into acronyms without mentioning AI. Do you see a future for it in the music?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a client in AI, have for the last several years. I think AI is a phenomenal new direction that's coming, enabling fans who aren't musicians to create their own original music to put as a bed under a video of a wedding or a graduation or whatever. That's their own original composition. And by the way, they could then put that into a pool and others could use it. And the first creator that co-created it with the AI could get revenue streams from that.
What do you make of the copyright issues around AI? I mean,
well, again, we're talking
about giving AI a
we're talking about generative music, so it's original. It's original, created between the fan or the consumer and the AI itself. Now, you also have opportunities to replace dead artists in a group with AI that's neural and learns their part and what it sounds like. You also have opportunities for solo artists to create a band-like experience through AI. You also have experience to monetize stems and riffs from back catalog songs of stature. Like if you want the guitar riff from Satisfaction and Universal decides to license that, make that available in that context of AI for generative music, you can create a song using that riff, and it's a new way to monetize that royalty stream all over again for the artist and the songwriter.
Well, I mean, you can do that whether Universal licenses you to do that or not. Is that right? I mean, the question is whether you have a license to then pass it around.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
But I mean, if the labels are smart, they'll look at it as an incremental revenue stream and go ahead and license that stuff in that context.
Sure, I could see that coming. I'm going to ask you about some people a little bit later on. I don't want to go there quite yet because
Okay.
I want to talk about those people one after another and so forth. I think there's something interesting there.
There is one other technology category in the spirit of singing around corners I wanted to throw in briefly, if I could, Jim.
Yeah, oh, please do.
And that is the notion of fans being able to invest in artists' songs and their other royalty streams at the artist's behest. Both for rising artists, like a fan could invest in the next Billie Eilish that's charting on Spotify, and for established artists who maybe are looking for enabling their fans, like the Kiss Army, to be a part of song royalties. And I think that's very exciting. And I'm involved with a venture doing that, company called, well, I can't speak to, I won't drop names, but there's exciting things happening in that space too.
It's certainly an interesting concept. I mean, the notion of fundamental capitalism coming to break apart the kind of oligopolies that have delivered.
That's exactly right. Much like, and by the way, there's a precedent for all that, right? We lived through Bowie bonds, we lived through the music stock exchange 20 years ago, but they were all too early and it wasn't the right time in the market.
So you're the one to explain it. Tell the audience, many of whom may not even have been alive when Bowie bonds came
Okay,
along.
so 20 some years ago, David Bowie decided to raise money by creating what was called Bowie bonds, and fans could invest in future royalty streams on his back catalog. In this case, he was able to pay off or buy out his rights, and he could own everything outright with those funds received. And he raised quite a bit of money. I don't remember the exact figure off the top of my head, but it was a groundbreaking move on the part of an artist at that time.
So to be clear, he took his rights in the music that he created.
Yep.
And he offered them as a financial instrument, a bond.
That's correct.
And he pledged the proceeds, the future proceeds
That's
from
right.
that music to those who would choose to buy the bond.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And so by using this kind of a financial instrument, he was able to collect a large pile of cash.
Yep.
That he could then use to live on and create new music.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, good. Tell me about investing. Do you do much investing yourself into?
I do. But I don't pick stocks. I work with a partner, somebody I went to high school with actually, who's a VP at a wealth management firm, and he manages my finances, and we work that very closely together.
Tell me more. Tell us about your expectations with this, whether it's more interesting to buy stocks. Is it more interesting to invest in particular pieces of music like Bowie bond?
I think a well-balanced portfolio, diversified, is in order for virtually anyone, but I'm far from somebody to give investment counsel or stock advice. Personally, I'm more bullish on the equity side with stocks because of my age and because I'm in the tech world. So, you know, but over time, we're going to balance that with other things like muni bonds and things to hedge against a future recession or what may be coming sooner than we imagine.
Well, I won't ask you more about investing in stocks because it's not a good place to go with you, but I will ask you about the high-tech companies that you advise and what you're learning by advising high-tech companies and essentially where you think the action is going based on your work with high-tech companies who are trying to find a path to the future.
But that's just such a broad question, Jim. I don't know where to go with it.
It's very broad for you. You take it where you would like to take it. I know that you have a number of clients. You're an advisor to many. And so try this. Which kinds of companies are you looking for more of to do work with?
Well, I do work with everybody from funded startups all the way to Fortune 100 companies, divisions of those bigger companies. As a strategist, as somebody who can help clear clutter and cut through noise, and as a biz dev super connector. So in all cases, I help them figure out where they're headed, where they should be headed, where they want to be headed, and how to clear obstacles in the way and create the right partnerships to go make that happen. So
the audience wants to know 5 to 10 years out, what's your call?
About what?
About which companies are doing well.
Oh,
which technologies are most popular and still
yeah. I think obviously Zoom is a dark horse that came out of, left field as it did its IPO last year. Perfect timing. Boy, this whole remote work from home remote thing is not going to go away. So companies in that sector are poised for more success. Now Zoom is coming out with hardware, a whole setup that you can get to optimize your homework setup. Companies like Apple and Amazon aren't going anywhere. They're poised for more success as long as innovation keeps being the name of the game there. Netflix, the streamers, Apple TV, we'll see. There's so much happening in the streaming place, so many entrants in the market, that there will be some kind of a consolidation there too in the next few years. Who knows whether Apple decides to buy a film studio or a label. We'll see if that ever transpires.
Got a huge pile of cash.
They sure do. Talk about a war chest.
Yesterday, $15 billion of that was returned to them.
Yeah, indeed, just yesterday. Yeah, from the Irish government. But also, other health companies are certainly poised for great success in this next decade as the population is booming and everything's happening around COVID. Those are big winners to bet on all moving forward.
Hold on, David Hughes is here. We're doing the video.
Oh.
You come down here. Come here. People want to say hi.
And by the way, Brian, I want to agree with you. Finally, the stuff we've been predicting for decades is breaking out. I don't know about the rest of you, my peers that have been in this space for 25 years, but I'm tired of living inside a crystal ball waiting for the world to catch up.
There's Kelli Richards. Kelli Richards.
David, long time. How are you, my friend?
We're doing Who Knew? And she said she wanted to be sure to say hi to you when you
Good
got
to see you. It's been a while.
There's Paige. There's Wyatt. That's part of David's family. I hope I'm not breaking any age limits here or anything like that.
David is wearing the right T-shirt. I'm a beetleologist, so I applaud.
Beetleologist.
Yeah.
Ah, very, very good. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, well, I'm going to turn back to this and get done in a minute. You guys wander around and enjoy yourselves a little bit. Okay, very, very good. And I'll be with you when we're done with this.
You're starting the weekend early with David and his family visiting.
Yeah, look, I've been telling David for a long time, come out here, hunt, fish, whatever you want. We got a lot of land out here. And so finally he has shown up to do that. And that is a wonderful thing. And he's a great guy to get on here for even a few seconds because I think we all like David Hughes. David is the head of technology at the RIAA, and he's certainly been a busy man over the past couple of decades.
Indeed he has. And he comes from the label system as well before RIAA.
He was at Sony before that.
Right. That's exactly right.
Absolutely true. Okay.
I have to say one thing about many of our brethren that are on the calls with us today, Jim, and even you and I. It's so wonderful to be part of this inner circle of people that had vision for music tech 25 years ago. And 3 years ago, we had a reunion at Michael Dorff City Winery in New York.
I was there.
Gosh, that was fun. I mean, I just so much love this community.
Yeah, I enjoyed that quite a bit. That was really good. It was on the water in New York.
It was 3 years ago right now, like this weekend.
Yeah, and I want to say good things about City Winery generally because, Who Knew is affiliated with City Winery. And when we do them in person, we try to do them at the City Winery.
We sure do. Michael Dorff, I tip my hat. But Michael himself, of course, being a lifer, he and Andrew Richet, having started things with Knitting Factory and the DCN clubs back in the mid-90s.
Andrew Richet, what a great guy, He actually ran for office in New York City.
I know that, yeah.
In the right year, he could be mayor, honestly. Look, I got to ask you. So you were talked about Zoom and how they were going to hardware.
Yes.
I have to say I worry about anybody investing into hardware.
I thought that was an interesting move myself. I give them props, though, for trying to corner the market and deliver more value to their user base.
But people in the audience, one of your sisters here, Deborah Newman.
Yes, hi, Deb.
I think so highly of.
We both do.
And so she's asking, where are you on the future of the record labels?
Oh, well, one of my first clients when I left Apple many moons ago was Napster. And the thing is, it wasn't that it was about theft of music, in my opinion, but it's a roundabout way of answering that question. Labels are forced to re-identify, reinvent who they are in the market and their value. I think that in many cases, the structure, well, in a lot of cases, the structure of the old label system has been broken for decades.
Well, do we sell music anymore? I mean, do we really sell it?
I think we sell experiences. We sell relationships to artists, and we sell whole experiences with merch and things that go on with, if we ever do live concerts again, with tickets and interacting with artists. We sell experiences, information, interactivity. That's what we should be selling if we're running a label these days.
Right, because we're really not selling music anymore.
And frankly, before we get to what happens with labels, there are many factions coming up to replace them. Things like Platoon and run by my good friend Denzel Feigelson, artist management firms that are now becoming label-like. So labels have a lot to answer for moving forward about what they are and what value they actually add. It isn't just about writing big checks or small checks, rather, and keeping all the proceeds away from artists who should be taking more of the pie.
Kelli, do you differentiate labels from publishers?
I do, only because they have been historically to some extent. But again, I think that I'm always on the side of the artist to keep more of their own proceeds. And I give a lot of credit to David Israelite and the NMPA for constantly making sure that writers keep their share of anything that's happening in the digital age.
I see them both in somewhat different light, but they both seem to be coming towards the center. I know publishers who are making music and sound recordings, and sound recording companies who are acquiring publishers.
Yeah, and that's an interesting confluence to watch. Do they just collapse at one point and become an entity that artists can choose to work with? I don't know. I think there's so much entrenchment in the system, I don't see that happening.
Tell me about working with Stuart Copeland. I can't let you finish without that.
I was just in touch with him this morning, Jim, because it's his birthday today. And Stuart is absolutely brilliant. I mean, nobody wouldn't love to spend an afternoon with him. He can tell stories like nobody's business. He was around in the early days of digital, trying new things. He has reinvented himself more times than anybody else I know. After The Police, he became an award-winning film composer. Now he's scoring operas and ballets. I mean, he does whatever he wants. He's built a beautiful studio as part of his house compound that I've been to many times, where it's just in the round with cameras all around. He invites Dave Grohl, and when, Neil Peart was alive, they would all go and jam together in there. I mean, he's just having more fun. He's having the time of his life.
That's terrific. Now, Sumi in the audience, Sumi Sprinkle, is very curious about what evidence, what signifiers, she asks, what are the signals that come up that pique your interest about change?
Innovation and technology itself, what actually shows up on the landscape, emerging business models that I think could benefit artists in particular, but other stakeholders, especially content creators in general. And something I think is going to be something that catches on with consumers, that either solves a problem or creates a new opportunity that heretofore hasn't existed. So I look at all those parameters.
Is it generally hardware or is it generally software?
It's generally experiences again. It's what is the ultimate experience and what's enabling that. Is it a combination of both? Another example of this would be Dreamscape, run by my friends Aaron Grosky and Kevin Wall. In-world immersive experiences where you go in with your friends when times are different, and you strap on this battery pack and some headgear, and you are in-world, immersed in rainforests and on the moon and the Sahara Desert, and you feel it, you smell it, you experience it. There's nothing that's going to replace experiences moving forward. That's where it's at. People have enough stuff, but the technology enables these experiences, hardware and software.
Sounds like virtual travel.
Yeah, it is. It can be.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So you worked with Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about that.
I didn't so much work with him as he was my mentor. Even when he wasn't at Apple, when he was still running Next and Pixar, we grew up in the same town. And when I was in high school, I was in a group called Future Business Leaders of America. And we were tasked with going to get a mentor, somebody we admired in business. And I only had one name on that list. And, you know, I was having breakfast with my mom at crunchy granola cafes that he would also show up at. So I knew who he was. And I just approached him one day, and just something resonated between the two of us. He said, sure. And that became the beginning of a multi-decade relationship, which I cherish above all others. I think about him every single day, and that's not a joke.
That's fantastic. Look, he was a quirky guy.
He was, but he was never cruel to me. He was never cruel to me, never a cross word.
No, I don't mean cruel, because I just think quirky. Like, when I say quirky, I mean that he didn't leave a license plate on his car. He would.
Oh, no, he didn't. That's for sure. That's for sure. But this, I've always been drawn to quirky people. What about Prince and Todd Rundgren and Stuart Cole? These are all quirky, innovative, eccentric, brilliant, genius types. That's I love those type of people.
And that's what I'm curious about, are your observations there. Steve Jobs, so many people wonder, obviously he's gone, we won't have another opportunity. And so it's so important that we hear these stories from you.
Yeah.
Are there any that you feel are uniquely you and him?
Well, you know, one of my favorite things that we used to do, Jim, that I miss terribly, but it informs how I work with my own clients, is walking meetings, as simple as that sounds. Getting away from this paradigm of sitting opposite someone and behind a desk where there's a power struggle and an authoritarian situation, and just walking side by side as people, solving problems creatively, talking through ideas. It's amazing how powerful that is. And that was one of Steve's hallmarks. And I've adopted that as my own. So things like that are things you just can't, they're irreplaceable.
So you would have these walk and talks.
That's exactly right. And we both loved the apricot orchards that we grew up in Cupertino and Los Altos, where he was. And walking through the orchards, oh my God. And so he even planted a little apricot orchard on the new Apple campus as an homage to what had been there before. And that's my favorite part of the whole place.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Look, I got to ask you, what do you think Steve would make of a live streaming world?
I think he would have loved it because, again, Steve, like me, maybe me like him, was about creating wonderful experiences for consumers. And he would have loved that technology makes that possible, especially as seamlessly, if you want to call it that, as it has been during these COVID times, when that's the only way anybody's going to experience anything like a concert.
You know, look, I know you're right that he thought of them as consumers because he sold them consumer products. There's no question about that. And yet I hate the word consumer.
Call them fans. Call them fans.
Yeah, no, and I'll just explain why. You know, this whole notion of consumption, decrementing supply, moving products, it's one that I'm uncomfortable with because I really don't think it's where we're at or where we're headed to. But certainly this word consumer drove Apple.
Yes.
And it still does.
But no, you're not quite there yet, Jim. You're not quite there. We had a slogan, changing the world one person at a time. The culture of the company was about, and I wrote a whole book on the culture of the company, by the way, The Magic and Moxie of Apple. It was about—
People still buy that on Amazon?
Yeah. It was about enabling people, content creators and fans alike, to actually be creators. That was the essence of the Think Different campaign. That was the essence of why the products were ever built in Steve's mind. It was about empowering people to create. These are tools to create.
So hardware tools to create.
That's correct. That was always the vision. And ultimately to empower lifestyle when Apple transitioned from being a computer company to a consumer products company. And I'm sorry, I'm using the word consumer again.
No, don't feel bad about it. And I think it's entirely appropriate there.
Yeah.
I do. I think, we're definitely dealing with something we can count. I think the tough part is when it crosses over into the music business, where we don't really have something to count anymore, where it really isn't something we consume. We don't decrement supply at all. So we don't match supply and demand. We are not in a typical consumer product business.
That's right.
And so I find myself uncomfortable with it. And part of the discomfort I feel is how we typically deal with consumers. I say that because we essentially shout next at a cash register. And it's a kind of notion of consummating and all that that word embodies.
Well,
And
I don't want to make this all about Apple, but that was why the Apple stores were created the way they were, so that people were not treated like numbers or cows or cattle. It just that you would have an experience with a person, you would have a personal experience, and they would help you in real time get all of your needs met and get just the right things pulled together for your own needs. That was
so what's your experience with TikTok?
Say again about TikTok?
Yeah, what's your experience with it? What do you think the experience is there with TikTok? As an example, and I don't mean to exclude Twitch, because I think both of them are interchangeable in a way in this new live streaming business.
That's right.
And so I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the experience there? What has been your experience there? And where do you think that experience is going?
Well, I have to be honest. I don't spend a lot of time personally like Karen does, Karen Allen with Twitch.
Sure.
I don't spend a lot of time day to day with TikTok because I'm working for my clients. But I pay attention to trends and what others are doing with it. And there's no arguing with the power of both for having just caught lightning in a bottle with fans, especially younger millennial types and Z generation. So
are they getting cut off?
I don't know. That's a political question, at least in the case of TikTok. In the case
I gotta ask, could we stop them?
Well, in the case of Twitch, it's like rewind, 2007 when YouTube came out, thereabouts, and the labels are doing cease and desist orders with music. I mean, that's ridiculous. I see Twitch as a new platform to create new monetization opportunities for music. That's the way I would view it. I'd lean in to embrace that as opposed to threatening to sue them,
Yeah, I think that's great, but I got to ask, will we shut down TikTok due to the Chinese government's influence? Can we shut down something?
First of all, I don't think it's possible to, but I think it becomes a political pawn is what's happening right now. Yet another political pawn. But I don't think it can be shut down. I don't.
So you think we'll still be watching it even if Trump decides he doesn't want to?
I do.
Good. Well, I mean, look, I share your sentiment. I think if it's digital, it's going to find its way. Obviously, consumer products are a different story.
Look, I was a big believer in Napster. 70 million people could have been monetized if they hadn't been cut off at the knees.
Tell me about your thoughts about Napster. I mean, certainly you had time before it came and after it came to think deeply about.
Yeah, I thought, look, power to the people. Power to the people. People were voting. They were voracious. They wanted more and more music, and they could have been monetized. The labels could have embraced that passion and thrown more experiences and products at them. And they could have been, it could have been a totally a game changer to grow the industry instead of what happened where the industry got cut in half or even more, down to a third, I think, at one point.
What would you like to have seen happen?
What specifically?
Yeah, I mean, if you have thoughts, I'm curious.
I would like to have seen artists doing promotions aimed at that growing audience, creating bundles like what Prince tried to do with tickets and product and discounts to merch and chances to get access to tickets early and whatever experiences made sense that time 20 years ago, could have been harvested and packaged and promoted, as opposed to, living in fear of what wound up happening, which, by the way, wound up happening anyway. Labels didn't wind up holding on to the CD paradigm and keeping all those margins. It didn't happen anyway.
In some ways, it's just a metaphor, Napster, for whatever the youth of a particular time.
Whatever the disruptive platform of the day is.
Yeah, their new medium. And of course, I love saying Marshall McLuhan's name and pointing out that he thought the medium was the message. And so Napster continues to be offered as a kind of word that delivers this effect that this was the medium of a time.
Yeah, and then it was YouTube, or there was MySpace, then it was YouTube, and then now it's Twitch. And so the disruption happens, consumers glom onto it, and the labels run in fear. And it's like a knee-jerk reaction every single time, and it's the wrong approach. I mean, David's right here. We can't pull him into the conversation. He probably has an idea or two about all that.
Deborah Newman's a little upset with me for, as she puts it, trivializing McLuhan. I thought that it was great that I brought him up at all. Frankly, he's facing a diminishing time horizon, but
Right.
big fan of Marshall McLuhan.
I am a big fan of his too. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I mean, just an amazing guy, and I've studied his life, and I just can't say enough good about him. So I'm sad if I'm trivializing him. That is a sad
That's
thing.
not the intention, Deb. I'm sure it's not.
I would happily spend a whole hour talking about McLuhan, to be honest with you. I have a paper on ResearchGate about McLuhan. So if any of you have an account on ResearchGate, I've written a paper about Marshall McLuhan and what I think, and it's an oft-cited paper, apparently. And it gets quite a few reads on ResearchGate. That's one of the only creative things I do other than giving talks or this that put me in league with, say, Michelle. So I can say, Michelle, I know the feeling of somebody using my intellectual property, and but it's not quite the same as music, of course.
Exactly.
Is in a whole different category. So,
you know, Jim, I do want to just touch on one other thing I'm doing these days besides consulting to companies, and that is my passion for being an advisor or a thought partner to leaders and high achievers in tech, music, entertainment.
I love that you do that. Will you tell people how they could avail themselves of your services?
Yeah.
Examples?
My website, just kellyrichards.com for those services.
And by the way, you got to spell that, Kelly.
But
you got to tell it. It's an I, not a Y at the end of Kelly.
That's right. Thank you. And anyway, it's really the notion of helping people reinvent themselves, their brand, their leadership, their presence in the world, recrafting their life in a way that really matters and is most fulfilling beyond just making money. And there's nothing more rewarding to me than doing that with artists or with other people, you know, with just business leaders and others, innovators. You know, those are the people I love working with.
Are there any challenges you'd love to take on that you actually feel uneasy about? Like, would there be somebody whose career that would so challenge you that you would wonder, can I be helpful? And yet you would want so much to be helpful.
Well, yeah, a great example of that might be like Brian Stevenson, who does the Equal Justice Initiative. I love his work and him as a person, but I don't know that I could add a lot of value to him necessarily, but I would love to try. That's someone I'd love to have a conversation with for possibilities.
I would think you would bring a great deal to someone who wanted to understand better the role of the media and the role of the world expressing itself in whatever their particular cause is.
Exactly. And then, of course, connecting them with the people and the resources to help accelerate wherever they decide they want to go. Yeah.
Wow. You know, I heartily recommend anyone out there who's trying to figure these issues out in their career to get in touch with you. Yes, they should go to your website. Do you want to pass along your email address as well? Or
they're all on the website.
Word for you, or what?
All my contact info is on the allaccessgroup.com website, which is consulting for companies, and the kellyrichards.com. All my contact info is on both websites. Just Kelly with an I at allaccessgroup.com.
Wait a minute. So All Access Group would also be a place to find you.
Yes, but only temporarily. I'm in the process of merging the two sites back into one under the kellyrichards.com domain.
So you're bringing it all in under Kelly Richards.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
It got too
confusing. Go on record with any predictions for the future?
Predictions for the future?
Yeah, I mean, look, I happily bet you on things because I'm a man who knows, who has made it clear I'm willing to bet on these things. You and I, we don't have to have a bet on them, but it would be great to hear you go on record with some predictions for what's going to be coming about. Maybe some long bets into the distant future.
But again, such a broad question, Jim. I'm not sure where to go with it.
I know. I would not want to shoehorn you. You are a woman with great perspective, and I would not want to put you into any category.
But then I get lofty. So, for example,
lofty for us.
I
think that's good.
I like to say that what's happening with this COVID pandemic, as awful as it is also a big blessing, a gift, because we have a chance to bring humanity together on a global scale in ways that we've never done. We have a chance to clean up the climate issue. We have a chance to make sure animals are taken care of, and those that are less fortunate that can't tend to themselves. I'd like to see humanity come together. and that is my fondest wish as a result of what's happening in all this chaos, if we're conscious and mindful enough to make it happen.
Wow, now that is something that Stuart Copeland could write music for.
Yes, he could.
Yeah.
more like Julian Lennon, who's my other bellwether. You know,
So
Julian,
who would you prefer wrote that music for you?
Julian's already written that song. Julian has already written that song. Jim, let me do a plug for Julian. 30 years ago, he wrote his. He wouldn't like me to reframe it this way, but it's like his equivalent of Imagine. His dad's Imagine. Julian's is called Saltwater. And if anybody listening or watching, go listen to that song. Go watch it on YouTube. Watch the video. If you don't have goosebumps on your arm and you don't think that it resonates with what we're dealing with today, 30 years on, you're not alive. You don't have a pulse.
Wow. Well done. You know, I have to say, I have so enjoyed this hour with you.
Thank you.
I feel like we're sitting out on my back porch or on my patio, just chatting about the past.
Well, that is exactly what we're doing. And one last thing about the past that we have to touch.
You talk much more about the future, which is
but
good.
the FA list I have to speak to as a charter member of the FA list.
Oh, yeah.
That has been such a privilege to be a part of. I look like a lurker there. I'm on every single day, but it's only because I don't do well with getting blasted like what happens with, you know, Jeff Price and Michael Robertson. Those guys can take it and deflect all day long. I don't choose to spend my time that way. So, but I love the FA list, and I'm grateful for you and John for having started it.
Look, crazy thing, I have to admit that I just recently, a week ago, started rereading 20 plus years of FA.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a wow.
Yeah.
I've decided I'm going to get a book done about it, but I'm depressed at how slow going it is. I counted just reading 1 month, and it was really only 3 weeks of March 2000, took me almost 12 hours. And I was just skimming through it. But you were there, and there were so many others who were there. Sean Parker writing about what he was up to. I mean, actually,
Travis Kalanick. Remember Travis at those early
Travis.
Yeah.
Travis and his frustration around Scour.
That's it.
Scour.net. Sean Parker wrote a series of notes about answering DMCA takedown requests. Personally, he said he personally was the service agent for the company. I mean,
that would be fun to read. Yeah.
Absolutely wild. I hope that I live to get this done and
Me
share
too, Jim.
because
Me too.
more than 20 years of people.
Don't forget, you know, you've got all the history, of course, but there's plenty of us still around who could chime in to reinforce any kind of stories or sidebars you might want help with.
Well, you're going to have to, because frankly, my own POV is that I can't reproduce the messages without getting a new authorization from these people.
Aha, there you go.
You know, I look at world a little bit, at least like Michelle Schacht hoped I would, which would be to get permission and to ask people before I use their messages again, even though I've already gotten them. Gotten the messages with permission to deliver them once. But my assumption is, in order to put them in a book, I'm going to need more authorization. So I'll be getting back to everybody, especially you.
Yeah.
You were such a big part of that.
And I've got a memory like an elephant, so I like Rain Man, so I'm sure I can help you with some of that.
Well, that's very good, but somehow I think it's more than like Rain Man.
I would love to thank the people that have joined us today. And I don't know, Tom, if we're up against it, but is there time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience?
Yeah, I've been passing them along, to be honest with you.
Okay.
And I hope I'm doing that. I think that there is a question that I did not address, and that is, what do you think is the trajectory of music technology as we move through the COVID crisis?
Well, certainly we have room to improve on live stream concerts, but I think we'll see a better job of some things going on with that. I'm working on a technology that enables people to call their own camera angles and be their own director on archival or live stream concerts. So there's something there. I think that, boy, that's a big topic too there, and I don't want to run long. There's so many things going on with technology in that space. Certainly what's happening with Twitch, you know, there's a lot going on.
Well, you know, look, I think you are an absolute inspiration.
And actually, Brian, thank you very much for
I'm not going to say just for women, because you are an inspiration for people. to jump in, get involved, stand up, talk to Steve Jobs. You formed relationships time after time by taking people's attention and feeling free to interrupt them. By the way, I saw Madeleine Albright on 60 Minutes. She said, I'm a teacher. They said, what do you teach? She said, I teach women to interrupt. They're always standing around after my talks waiting for the men to finish, and I want them to just interrupt.
I love it. I love it. That's great.
And I love that about you, that you're willing to stand up, interrupt, disrupt, fail fast, move on. You're an inspiration to everyone, Kelli.
Thank you so kindly, Jim.
We are lucky to have you, and people are going to see you again in the future in this space.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
You're going to be interviewing people. You're going to be bringing people here. It's not going to be me that needs to drive that. It's so important to me that it's other people. In this industry, people who hear footsteps all too often get nervous, and I am absolutely enthusiastic when I hear them. And so
Thank you.
You are an inspiration to so many, and I thank you for today, Kelli.
Pleasure is mine, gentlemen, and everybody listening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to leave this now, and I
Have fun with David.
showing you all. Oh, there you go.
There's Jim's property, gorgeous property.
Okay, so good.
Have fun,
That is
Jim.
rural Virginia, about an hour from the White House.
Enjoy your visit with David, too.
Hey, folks, let me wrap up real quick and say thank you to Jim and Kelli for a fantastic discussion. If you like what we're doing, just know that we're going to keep doing it. We have another program next Thursday at the exact same time featuring Gail Mitchell of Billboard Magazine interviewing David Linton. These are two people you're not going to want to miss. David Linton, for those of you who've never heard of him, is somebody that you're going to scratch your head and go, how have I never heard of this guy before? So I can't wait to present these two to you next week. And everyone stay safe and healthy. Please wear your mask. I'm looking for mine as we speak. I always end my programs by encouraging this. It's not hard. Put it on. Best to everybody.
Thank you, Tom.
Big fan
Bye,
of
everybody.
masks.
Bye,
I
Jim.
don't have one at the moment, but I'm home. So.